The letter came on a Tuesday, its crisp official paper feeling alien in my work-roughened hands. My husband Leo had been quiet for days, a coiled spring of suppressed energy. When he finally spoke, his words weren't meant for me, not really. They were a declaration to the universe, a pronouncement of his deserved assent. "Anya," he said, his voice echoing in our small, sparsely furnished home. "My transfer to Shanghai is approved. I can bring my family." A jolt of pure, unadulterated joy shot through me. Shanghai. The mythical city he'd whispered about in our early days, a place of glittering lights and impossible dreams. I saw it all in a flash. The bustling streets, the tall buildings, our son Mateo's wide eyes taking it all in. I was already turning, my mind racing through a mental inventory of our belongings, what to pack, what to sell, when his next words froze me in place. "I'll be taking 2 people with me. Mateo, of course. He is my blood, my heir. He must have this opportunity." He paused and the air grew thick. "And Clara." The name hung between us, a specter in our modest kitchen. Clara. The educated youth from Beijing who had arrived 3 years into our marriage. She was everything I was not. Delicate, softly spoken, her hands meant for holding books, not tilling soil. Clara. The word was a breath, barely audible. Leo wouldn't meet my eyes. "Her health is fragile, Anya. You've seen how she struggles with the farm work. The city air, her family's care, she needs this. She was born for city life. And I wasn't?" The question was out before I could stop it, laced with a bitterness I hadn't known I still possessed. Finally, he looked at me, and his gaze was not one of love or even apology, but of cold, hard practicality. "Be reasonable. You are a woman of the land. Your strength is here in these fields. What would you do in Shanghai? You'd be a fish out of water. Claire and we are from there. She understands that world. I'll take her first. Once I'm settled, once the opportunity arises, I'll send for you." In my first life, the life I had already lived and died in, I had crumbled at this. I had wept, I had screamed, I had begged. I had shown him the raw, ugly wound of my betrayal, and all it had earned me was his contempt and my son's growing disdain. I had waited a lifetime, my hope curdling into desperation with every unanswered letter. I had died as I had lived. Alone, forgotten, a pile of dirt under the ground while he built a new life a world away. But that was then. The memories of that lonely death were fresh, a searing brand on my soul. This time the tears didn't come. This time a cold, clear clarity washed over me. Why should I wait for a man? The National College entrance exam was being reinstated. The whispers had been circulating for months. It was my ticket out, and it wouldn't require Leo's permission or pity. I simply nodded, my face a placid mask. "I understand." Leo looked stunned, then immensely relieved. He had expected a battle and found surrender. He mistook my silence for submission, not the quiet before my own storm. The next day I began my preparations. I went to the coop and sold nearly every chicken I had painstakingly raised, the chickens whose eggs had nourished him back to health after a bad bout of fever. The money wasn't for his journey, it was for mine. I invested it in my future, hiding the notes away like precious seeds. At the village entrance, Old Man Feng, the local storyteller and busybody, called out. "Anya. Heard the news. Off to Shanghai with that husband of yours. Eh? Selling everything you can't carry? Don't forget to write to us little people when you're a city lady." I offered him a thin smile. "We'll see, Uncle Feng." Whether Leo would take me or not was irrelevant. My path was no longer tied to his. I returned home to the sound of recitation. Leo was in the main room, his glasses perched on his nose, teaching our 7-year-old son Mateo to recite classical poetry. He looked every inch the scholar, so far removed from the man I'd broken my back for. And sitting beside them, a book open on her lap, was Clara. Her eyebrows were like perfect brushstrokes, and even in silence she seemed to be smiling. Her skin still held the dewy freshness of youth, untouched by the sun and wind that had already etched fine lines around my eyes. She was holding a tray of steaming pastries, feeding them to my son. "Leo, Mateo has been studying so long," she said, her voice a gentle melody. "Let him have a snack and rest. A balanced approach is best." I remembered saying those exact words once and being sharply rebuked. "What do you know? Do you want him to end up a country bumpkin like you?" Yet now, Leo nodded agreeably, charmed by her concern. Mateo beamed. Thank you, Aunt Clara. These are delicious. You worked hard on these, thank you, Leo said to her, his voice dripping with a tenderness I hadn't heard in years. A bitter taste filled my mouth. I had risen before dawn to make those pastries. Clara had merely warmed them. Yet the credit was effortlessly hers. The old Anya would have burst in, desperate to claim her due. Now I just watched them, these three people who felt like strangers sharing a life I was no longer part of. Leo noticed me standing there. His gaze grew complicated, guilty and defensive all at once. He cleared his throat. Anya, about the paperwork for Shanghai. I've submitted the names. I remained silent, waiting. He took a breath. I know I promised to take you. But you're a farm woman. Your world is here. Claire, she needs this chance. I'll take her first. When there's an opportunity, I'll come back for you. Clara bit her lip, her eyes wide with performative distress. Leo, please don't argue because of me. I can stay. I'll be fine. I just miss my mother is all. Her performance was flawless. Mateo, my own son, crossed his little arms and glared at me with an unsettling maturity. You're being selfish, Mama. You were born here. Aunt Clara deserves to go home. You can just wait. The words should have eviscerated me. In another life they had. Now they only solidified my resolve. This child born from my body saw me as less than. I looked at their expectant, anxious faces and finally spoke, my voice calm and steady. Why are you all so agitated? I haven't said a word. Do what you need to do. I agree. The shock on their faces was almost comical. Then relief. Joy. The three of them embraced, a perfect little unit of shared happiness, tears of relief streaming down Clara's cheeks. They were the family. I was the inconvenient spectator. I didn't wait to watch their celebration. I turned and walked into my small bedroom, closing the door and locking it behind me. Outside, I heard Leo's muffled voice. Leave her be. She just needs a couple of days to sulk. She'll get over it. But I wasn't sulking. I was studying. I pulled my hidden stack of books from under the bed, their pages filled with notes written by lantern light. The exam was in a few months. Leo thought he was leaving me behind in this village. He had no idea I was preparing to race him to Shanghai. The lock on my door became my greatest ally. Behind it, a world unfolded that was entirely my own, a world of complex equations, historical timelines, and literary analysis. The silence in the house, once a heavy blanket of loneliness, was now a precious commodity, broken only by the soft rustle of pages and the scratch of my pencil. In my past life, this silence had been a prison. Now it was a sanctuary. Without the endless cycle of cooking, cleaning, and farming for two thankless males, my body felt lighter. The chronic ache in my lower back from years of bending over crops began to fade. My hands, once cracked and calloused, slowly softened. Each day I earned just enough work points to get by, then retreated to my room. My mind, so long neglected, was a parched field finally receiving rain, and it drank greedily. Leo and Mateo's world, in stark contrast, was falling into disarray. They had taken my labor for granted for so long they believed the house cleaned itself, the meals cooked themselves, and the firewood magically appeared by the hearth. Their quality of life plummeted. Meals were haphazard and bland, their clothes were often unwashed, and a fine layer of dust settled over everything. Leo watched me, a mixture of confusion and irritation on his face. He assumed this was my form of petty revenge, a silent protest. He tried to engage me sometimes, his tone condescending. The house is a mess, Anya. A man needs a proper meal after a long day. I'd look up from my book, my expression blank. I'm busy, I'd say simply before returning to my studies. My indifference infuriated him more than any argument could have. He was used to my emotional reactions. This cold detachment was a language he didn't understand. He and Mateo began eating more frequently at Clara's, a fact that no longer twisted a knife in my heart but only confirmed my suspicions. They would return smelling of her delicate perfume and the rich, city-style food she knew how to procure. They made a point of speaking only to each other, shutting me out of their new, exclusive circle. I was an island and I preferred it that way. The fragile truce shattered one afternoon. I was hunched over a particularly difficult physics problem when a small knock came at my door. I opened it to find Mateo standing there, shifting from foot to foot. Mama, he said, his voice a little unsure. I memorized Ode to the Goose. All of it. A flicker of the old pain sparked. In my previous life this was a moment I lived for. He would recite and I would shower him with praise, my heart swelling with pride. He would then sigh as if burdened by my simple-minded admiration and say, "It's just a poem. You wouldn't understand the deeper meaning." Now I just looked at him, at his expectant face waiting for a reward I no longer had the energy to give. I nodded. "That's good, Matteo. Keep practicing." The light in his eyes died. His face crumpled into a scowl. "You don't care. You never care anymore," he shouted before turning and running straight into Leo, who had been listening from the hallway. Leo's face was dark with disapproval. "He's just a boy, Anya. He needs encouragement." Was that so hard? A dry, humorless laugh escaped me. "Weren't you the one who said too much praise would make him arrogant? That I shouldn't interfere with his intellectual development?" My words, his own weapon turned against him, left him speechless. Frustrated, Matteo stamped his foot. "I'm going to find Aunt Clara. He listens. She's 100 times better than you." The words that had once destroyed me now landed with a dull thud. They had no power here. Before Leo could muster another reprimand, I had already closed the door, the physics problem far more compelling than their drama. My focus was broken only by the arrival of officials from the county a few days later. I heard their voices from my room. Serious, official. Curious, I slipped out to fetch water, lingering just within earshot. "Comrade Leo," one man was saying, "we've heard you are planning to relocate to Shanghai without your wife. We must investigate this matter. It reflects poorly." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. An intervention. A chance. Then I heard Leo's voice, smooth and practiced, dripping with patriotic fervor. "Comrades, you misunderstand. This is not a personal matter but one of national contribution. Comrade Clara is a brilliant intellectual. Taking her to Shanghai will allow her knowledge to benefit the motherland on a larger scale. My personal feelings are irrelevant. My wife, she understands. She supports this decision for the greater good." I stood frozen, my knuckles white around the dipper. He was using me. Using my supposed compliance to further his own ends, wrapping his selfishness in the flag. The officials, utterly convinced, murmured their approval. One even said, "Such sacrifice. The nation thanks your family. A small subsidy will be provided to your wife for her understanding." The subsidy. My exam money. Rage warred with cold calculation. I could burst in now, expose his lies. But would they believe a rural woman over him? I might lose the subsidy altogether. Clenching my jaw, I retreated silently back to my room. I would let him have his lie. For now. I needed that money more than I needed the fleeting satisfaction of confrontation. Based on the timeline from my past life, the approval for the subsidy would come through any day. I began to look for Leo, planning to calmly ask for what was rightfully mine. I couldn't find him or Matteo. Of course. They were at Clara's. I decided to wait, but as I turned to go back inside, they arrived. And they weren't alone. They were escorting Clara like royalty. She was wearing a stunning new cheapao of emerald green silk. But it was the jewelry that made my blood run cold. Gaudy gold bracelets jangled on her wrists, and intricate earrings dangled from her ears. They looked expensive. Matteo saw me first and raised his voice, loud and deliberately cruel. "Look, Aunt Clara. You look like a movie star. Not like Mama. Pretty things would be wasted on her." The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. The subsidy had been approved. And Leo had already spent it. On her. A cold fury, clean and sharp, replaced the heat of my anger. I walked up to them, my movements deliberate. I didn't look at Leo. I pointed directly at the gold glittering on Clara's wrists. "Where," I asked, my voice dangerously low, "did you get the money to buy those?" Leo looked startled, then annoyed. "Must you make a scene, Anya? I treat Clara like a sister. Is it a crime to buy her a gift? Don't be jealous. Look, I bought you something too." He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a thin, pathetic-looking gold-plated ring. People in the cities exchange these when they marry. The insult of it, the cheap token to placate me after showering her with riches, was the final straw. I slapped the ring out of his hand. It skittered across the dirt floor. "That was my money," I hissed. "What gave you the right?" His face contorted in anger. "You crazy woman. The money was in your name, but it was my promotion that secured it. It belongs to me. I'll spend it how I see fit. You live in a village. What do you need money for? But if Clara returns to Shanghai looking poor, she'll be looked down upon. His entitlement was breathtaking. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more threat than a scream. Either you get that money back or she takes every piece of that jewelry off right now and gives it to me. If you don't, I will go to the authorities and report you for engaging in capitalist decadence. Let's see how far you get to Shanghai with that on your record. The color drained from Clara's face. Tears, real ones of sheer panic this time, welled in her eyes. The threat to her Shanghai dream was the only language she truly understood. Leo, please, I told you I didn't want them, she cried, her hands trembling as she ripped the bracelets off. Give them back to her. Take the earrings. Leo was apoplectic. You vile woman. Can't you stand to see anyone else happy? Mateo joined in a tiny, furious echo. I hate you. You're mean. But I stood my ground, a rock against their storm. Finally, weeping, Clara shoved the jewelry into my hands, along with a few crumpled bills from her own pocket. A desperate peace offering. It wasn't enough for the exam fees, not nearly, but it was a start. As they retreated, shooting me venomous looks, Leo delivered his final ultimatum. If you don't apologize to Clara, consider us strangers until we leave. I didn't bother to reply. I turned, the cold metal of the jewelry digging into my palm, and went back inside. I had a future to buy, and I knew exactly where I had to go next to get the rest of the money. It was time to swallow my pride and visit my parents. The walk to my parents' house was a journey through my own history. Every furrowed field, every gnarled tree, was a testament to the life I was determined to leave behind. The jewelry Clara had returned felt like a lead weight in my pocket, a bitter symbol of everything wrong with my marriage. The few bills she'd added were an insult, a pittance that wouldn't even cover the bus fare to the provincial capital, let alone the exam fees and the books I desperately needed. My mother was in the yard, scrubbing clothes in a large tub. She looked up, her face etched with a worry that deepened when she saw my expression. Anya. What is it? Is everything all right with Leo and Mateo? We heard about Shanghai. The concern in her voice almost broke me. I had kept so much from them, putting on a brave face to uphold the illusion of my happy marriage. Now I had to shatter it. No, Mama, I said, my voice thick. Everything is not all right. I told her everything. I told her about Leo's plan to take Clara, his cold dismissal of me, his spending of the subsidy, my subsidy, on another woman. I showed her the gaudy jewelry. I didn't cry. I stated it all as cold, hard fact. My father emerged from the house, his brow furrowed. He listened in silence, his hands, gnarled from a lifetime of labor, clenching and unclenching. When I finished, the air was heavy with their shock and anger. That snake, my father finally growled, spitting on the ground. After all we did for him. After all you did for him. I need money, Baba, I said, cutting through their anger. I had no time for their outrage. I needed action. The national exam, it's being reinstated. I'm going to take it. It's my only way out. The announcement landed like a stone. They stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. The exam, my mother repeated, bewildered. Anya, that's for the educated youths, the students from the cities. What would you? I mean, she trailed off, too kind to voice the doubt I saw in her eyes. You? A farm wife. I can do it, I said, the conviction in my voice surprising even me. I was top of my class before I married. I never stopped reading, never stopped learning. I just need a chance. The fee is 50 yuan. Plus money for books for the bus. 50 yuan. It was a fortune. A month's careful wages. My parents exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. I saw the doubt, the fear of wasting hard-earned money on a daughter's impossible dream. My father sighed, a sound of deep weariness. Anya, this exam, it is a dream for city people. It is not for us. Leo, he is a bad man, but he is going to Shanghai. Perhaps you should be patient, wait for him to send for you. This exam, it is too risky. It was the same mentality that had kept me chained to Leo for a lifetime. The fear of reaching for more. But I was no longer that woman. I am not waiting for him, I said, my voice flat and final. I will never wait for him again. If you cannot help me, I will find another way. I will sell my wedding quilt. I will work double shifts. But I am taking that exam. My mother looked at my face, at the hard resolve she had never seen there before. She placed a wet, wrinkled hand on my father's arm. She has his eyes, the man who came to tell us about the exam possibility last month. She has the same look. He turned to me. We do not have much. But we have saved for a new plowshare. You can have that money. The relief that washed over me was so profound my knees felt weak. It was a loan against their own livelihood. I will pay you back, I promised, my voice trembling for the first time. I swear it. With the money from my parents combined with the pathetic amount from Leo and the value of the jewelry I could pawn, I had enough. I bought every second-hand textbook and practice exam I could find. My life contracted into a single burning point: study. I became a ghost in my own home. I rose before dawn, did the absolute minimum of chores to earn my work points, and then disappeared into my books. The world outside my room ceased to exist. Leo and Mateo's cold shoulders were a blessing. Their muttered complaints about cold meals and dirty clothes were meaningless noise. I was nourishing my mind, and it was a feast that left no room for their petty hungers. The weeks blurred together. I filled notebooks with formulas, memorized historical dates, and practiced essays until my hand ached. The knowledge from my past life was my secret weapon. I remembered the broad themes of that first reinstated exam, the essay prompts about national reconstruction, the specific physics concepts they emphasized. I focused my energy with a precision no other candidate could possibly have. The night before the exam, a strange calm settled over me. I packed a small bag with my pencils, my registration slip, and a cold manti to eat on the journey. I was so absorbed in my final review that I didn't hear them come home. Leo stood in the doorway of my room, his eyes falling on the bag. His face instantly darkened with suspicion. "Where do you think you're going at this hour?" he demanded, stepping forward to block my path. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face a placid mask. The lie came smoothly, fueled by a lifetime of pleasing him. "I packed a few things for you and Mateo. For your journey to Shanghai. I thought you might need them." It was a pathetic bundle. Some patched clothes, a few dried vegetables. Mateo, rubbing sleep from his eyes, peered in and scoffed. "This old stuff? Dad said we'll get new clothes in Shanghai." "I don't want it." Leo's suspicion evaporated, replaced by a flicker of guilt. He let out a breath. "It's late. Get some rest. There's no need for this. We'll manage." He almost sounded kind. The moment they were settled, I slung my real bag, heavy with books and hope, over my shoulder, unlatched the door, and slipped out into the cool, silent night. The walk to the bus station in the pre-dawn darkness was the most liberating journey of my life. Each step took me further away from them, closer to myself. The bus ride was long and bumpy, but I spent it with my eyes closed, reciting chemical formulas and literary quotes, my mind a humming engine of focus. The exam hall was in a school in the provincial capital. It was filled with nervous young men and women, most a decade younger than me. I saw their anxious glances, their whispered revisions. I saw a few who looked at my simple rural clothes with faint disdain. I ignored them all. I found my assigned seat, laid out my pencils, and took a deep, steadying breath. The papers were distributed. The rustle of 100 pages filled the room. I looked down at the first question. It was exactly as I remembered. A smile, small and private, touched my lips. Then I began to write. For 2 days I lived in a bubble of pure concentration. The outside world, Leo, Mateo, Clara, the village, it all faded into insignificance. There was only the paper, the questions, and the steady, sure flow of my answers. I poured a lifetime of longing and a second chance at life onto those pages. When I walked out of the exam hall on the final afternoon, the sun seemed brighter, the air sweeter. I was exhausted, but it was a clean exhaustion, the kind that comes from having given your all. I had done it. I had seized my chance. Meanwhile, as I boarded the bus back to the village, my mind already drifting to the future, Leo was standing at our door, a strange tightness in his chest. Their bus to Shanghai was leaving that evening, and I was nowhere to be found. The bus ride back to the village was a journey in reverse, not just in distance but in spirit. The woman who had walked to the station in the dark was not the same one returning. The weight of the exam was gone, replaced by a buoyant, terrifying hope. I felt stripped bare, my future no longer dictated by a man's whims but suspended in the opaque hands of anonymous graders in some far-off city. I arrived home to a hollow silence. The house felt larger without Leo and Mateo's resentful presence taking up all the emotional space. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon sun slanting through the window. On the table, propped against an empty cup, was a letter. I picked it up. Leo's precise, scholarly handwriting spelled out my name. In my past life, this letter had been a talisman, a fragile thread connecting me to a dream that was never mine. I had carried it until the paper grew soft and frayed. Now I skimmed its contents with a detached curiosity. It was full of empty poetry, hollow promises of sending for me later, and an address in Shanghai. A place to send my pleas, not an invitation to join them. A one-way street of devotion. A cold smile touched my lips. I didn't bother reading it carefully. Instead, I used the expensive paper to wipe a layer of dust from the table, crumpled the ball and tossed it into the wash basin. Let it dissolve into pulp. His words meant nothing to me anymore. Only my parents knew where I had truly been those 2 days. When I visited them, their anxiety was palpable. "Well, how was it?" my father asked, trying to sound casual as he sharpened a hoe. "I did my best," I said, which was the simple truth. I couldn't allow myself or them to hope too fiercely. That's all that matters. My mother pressed a bundle of vegetables into my hands. "You look tired, child. Don't worry about things." She couldn't even name the exam, as if saying it aloud might jinx the outcome. I returned to a life of waiting, but it was a different kind of wait than before. This was active, filled with purpose. I went back to working in the fields, earning my keep. The physical labor was a relief, a way to ground my restless mind. I fell into the familiar rhythm of planting and weeding, my body working on muscle memory while my thoughts soared far away. But the village had eyes. My solitary return had not gone unnoticed. The initial assumption that I'd left with Leo and Clara had curdled into confusion, and then into avid curiosity. The whispers started like a soft wind through the barley. I was fetching water from the well when I heard it. A cluster of women, the village's chief archivists of gossip, fell silent as I approached. Their eyes were full of a pitying kind of hunger. "Heard from my cousin in the county," one was saying, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper meant to carry. "He saw them at the market. Leo and that educated girl Clara. Buying jewelry. Not just one piece, a whole set. Gold." Another clucked her tongue. "And where would he get that kind of money? He never lifted a finger here." It was all Anya's sweat. "Maybe he saved it," a third offered, though she didn't sound convinced. "Saved what?" the first woman retorted. "His pride. That's all he had. No, that money came from somewhere. Poor Anya. Worked herself to the bone for that man, and he replaces her with the first city girl who flutters her eyelashes at him." They were so absorbed they didn't notice I had stopped walking and was standing right beside them. They jumped when I spoke. "The money was a subsidy," I said, my voice flat. "From the county. For me. Because he told them I supported his decision to take his mistress to Shanghai for the good of the nation." The silence was absolute. They stared at me, mouths agape, caught between embarrassment and ravenous interest. So I told them. I didn't spare Leo or myself. I told them about the promotion, the betrayal, the jewelry bought with my money, my fight to get it back, and the final lonely departure. I held nothing back. Their faces shifted from pity to shock to sheer, unadulterated fury. "That spineless worm," one of them spat, her hands on her hips. "After you fed him. After you gave him a son. To think we all thought he was so cultured, so intelligent," another cried. "He's just a common thief. A scoundrel." Their outrage was a living thing, hot and immediate. They stood with me, their voices rising in a chorus of condemnation for Leo and pity for me. It was a strange sensation. In my first life, I had hidden my shame, bearing the humiliation in lonely silence. Now I had an army of furious women marching through the village square on my behalf. Their gossip, once a weapon that could have shamed me, was now aimed squarely at the man who deserved it. The news of the reinstated exams had trickled down to the village, but it was treated as a fairy tale, a thing for other people in distant places. No one from our village had ever taken it, let alone passed. It was an event on the radio, not something that touched our lives. So I kept my participation to myself. The 50 yuan fee was a king's ransom, and the idea that a farmer's wife would spend it on a near-impossible dream was the kind of story that would get you laughed out of the commune. I simply worked, waited, and trusted in the knowledge I had fought so hard to reclaim. The day the results were posted in the county seat, I was weeding a potato patch. I saw my father from a distance hurrying down the path toward me. His usual steady plod was gone, replaced by a frantic, almost stumbling pace. My heart seized. Had something happened? He reached me breathless, his face flushed and streaked with tears. For a terrifying second I thought it was bad news. Then he grabbed my shoulders, his grip tight, and shook me gently. "You did it," he choked out, his voice raw with emotion. "Anya, you did it. Third in the whole province." The world tilted on its axis. The hose slipped from my numb fingers. Third. Not just a pass. Not just a score. Third. My mother arrived then, weeping openly, laughing and crying at the same time. They hugged me, they hugged each other, the three of us a trembling, joyous mess in the middle of the field. The other workers stopped and stared, bewildered by the scene. The news exploded through the village like a thunderclap. Anya. The abandoned wife. The farmer. Third in the province. The disbelief was quickly washed away by a tidal wave of communal pride. I was theirs, a product of their soil, and I had achieved the impossible. My parents, brimming with a joy they had never dared to expect, went to the supply co-op and used a huge portion of their savings to buy out the store's entire candy supply. They went door to door, handing out sweets to everyone, their faces shining with triumph. Then the phone at the commune started ringing. It never stopped. First it was the county officials, then the provincial education bureau. Voices of importance and congratulations crackled down the poor line. Reporters from the provincial newspaper wanted to interview the peasant prodigy. Amidst the whirlwind, a familiar car kicked up dust on the road to our house. Director Jiang, the man who had granted the subsidy, stepped out. He was beaming, a man vindicated. "Comrade Anya," he boomed, shaking my hand vigorously. No wonder your husband was so confident in leaving. This was the plan all along, wasn't it? He goes first to secure the position and you follow through on your own merits. A brilliant strategy. Why didn't you tell me you were taking the exam? I could have helped you more. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. I felt a strange sense of calm amidst the chaos. "Director Jiang," I said quietly. "My husband didn't know." His smile faltered. "What?" "He didn't know I was taking the exam. He believed I would stay here and wait for him." The director's face went through a series of contortions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally, dawning horror as the pieces of Leo's lie reassembled themselves in a new, damning configuration. I walked into my room and returned with the small cloth pouch. I poured the contents into his hand. The gaudy bracelets, the earrings, the pathetic ring. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is what remains of the subsidy you gave me. My husband used it to buy jewelry for Clara. I had to fight him, to threaten to report him for capitalist decadence, to get even this much back. Tell me, Director, would you have told him about my plans?" Director Jiang stared at the cheap gold in his palm as if it were a poisonous snake. His face flushed a deep, mortified red. The man who had been so easily swayed by Leo's patriotic rhetoric now saw himself as a dupe, a pawn used to facilitate a man's betrayal of his wife. That, he sputtered, rage choking him. That morally bankrupt intellectual. Using such high-sounding lies to cover his filthy behavior. I had known. I never would have. He has disgraced the privilege. I saw his humiliation and knew I had to guide it. I placed a gentle hand on his arm. "This isn't your fault. He belittled me for years. He forbade me from studying. It was only after he left that I found the peace to focus. Your subsidy gave me that chance. And while Leo's character is flawed, his academic skills are real. He can still contribute in Shanghai. Our personal grievances shouldn't hinder the nation's progress." I watched him closely. I was using Leo's own weapons, lofty sentiments, national interest, but I was wielding them with a precision he never possessed. I was the wronged party, yet I was magnanimous, rational, putting the country first. It was a devastatingly effective performance. Director Jiang fell silent, but his eyes were alight with a new, furious purpose. He promised to report everything truthfully to his superiors. He left, not with congratulations, but with the grim determination of a man who had been made a fool of and was intent on setting things right. I knew what that meant. Leo's comfortable new life in Shanghai was already crumbling, and he didn't even know it. The letters began to arrive a month after the results were published. The first one was from Leo, addressed to me at my parents' house. My mother brought it to me, her face a mixture of curiosity and concern. "It's from Shanghai," she said, handing me the envelope as if it might bite. I took it, feeling the cheap paper. The return address was his parents' place in Shanghai. In my past life, this would have been a sacred object, pored over for days, searching for hidden meaning in every carefully chosen character. Now it was just paper. I slid it open and skimmed the contents. It was exactly what I expected. Flowery prose about the bustling city, the challenges of his new job, a few hollow lines about how Mateo missed me. It was devoid of any real feeling, a performance meant to placate me. It ended as always with the empty promise, "I will send for you when the time is right." There was no mention of my exam, no hint that he knew my world had changed. He was still writing to the simple village wife he thought he'd left behind. I didn't bother finishing it. I crumpled it and tossed it into the kindling box. "If any more come," I told my mother, "you can read them. If there's money inside, keep it. If not, throw them away. Don't waste stamps forwarding his nonsense." My mother looked shocked, then nodded slowly, a new respect in her eyes. The flow of letters increased. Leo's tone shifted from performative nostalgia to confusion, then to a faint, nagging worry. "Why haven't you written?" he asked in the third letter. "Are you ill? Did you not receive the address?" I could almost see him, sitting at his parents' small kitchen table, growing increasingly unsettled by my silence. My lack of response was a void his carefully constructed narrative couldn't fill. His letters became more frequent, more desperate. He wrote to my neighbors, to the village chief, begging them to tell me to write, to assure him I was all right. He was trying to manage my story, to keep me in my assigned role as the patient, waiting wife, and my refusal to play my part was unbalancing him. I learned later from snippets in his letters that his arrival in Shanghai had been far from the triumphant return he'd imagined. Without me there to manage everything, the reality of his new life had quickly soured. The journey itself had been a disaster. On the road, with limited funds, Leo had prioritized feeding Clara and Mateo, going hungry himself for 2 days. In those moments of hollow stomach and weary travel, he told me he had thought of me, of how I had always ensured there was food, how I had managed the meager resources with a skill he'd never appreciated. Once in Shanghai, the problems multiplied. He brought Mateo to his parents' cramped apartment. It was better than the village, but it was not the palace of dreams Mateo had envisioned. The city children, sharp-eyed and quick-tongued, took one look at his rural manners and patched clothes and dubbed him a little country bumpkin. No one wanted to play with him. In the village, Mateo's schooling had been simple and he'd been a top student effortlessly. In Shanghai, the curriculum was advanced, fast-paced and fiercely competitive. He struggled, falling behind immediately. The pressure and the loneliness crushed his spirit. He began to cry, begging to go home to see me. Leo, meanwhile, was drowning in the pressures of his new job. After years in the countryside where I had handled all the practicalities of life, he was out of practice in the competitive, fast-paced world of a Shanghai technical unit. He was physically and mentally overwhelmed. When Mateo came to him sobbing about the bullies, Leo's patience snapped. "Just study harder," he shouted, his own stress boiling over. "If others can do it, why can't you? You must have taken after your mother. So slow and stupid. Don't get into fights. This isn't the countryside. Just focus on your work and people won't talk about you." But Mateo, through his tears, fired back a truth that stunned Leo into silence. "But Mama told me that if someone bullies me, I should fight back." The memory hit Leo like a physical blow. He remembered his first year in the village when some local men had mocked his city softness. He'd been too stunned to respond, but I had immediately rolled up my sleeves and confronted them, my voice loud and fearless in his defense. The memory shamed him. For the first time he lost control and shouted at his son in pure, undiluted anger. "You're a boy. Crying is disgraceful. You're not a country kid anymore, so stop bringing up your mother." It was only after this outburst that the true silence from home began to gnaw at him. Why hadn't I written? He'd left the address. Surely I'd seen it. Unless I didn't know how to send a letter. The thought settled in his mind, a comforting, condescending explanation. Of course. My family had lived in the village for generations. What need did we have for the postal service? I was probably waiting, confused, for a letter from him. It was this arrogant assumption that finally prompted him to write a proper letter, the one I'd used for kindling. He and Matteo composed it together, he told me later, picturing me receiving it with tearful joy, needing them to show me how to respond. By the time that letter was mailed, I was already packing my own bags for a very different journey. My next move was calculated. I took a portion of the small bonus I'd received from the province and walked to the other end of the village, to the home of Brother Liang. He was another educated youth, sent down even earlier than Leo. He was a quiet, capable man, and crucially he had a wife and 2 young children he adored. He had been the other candidate for the promotion to Shanghai, but he had refused the opportunity because it would have meant leaving his family behind. His wife, a kind woman with a strong, honest face, answered the door. "Anya. Come in, come in." Her eyes were full of the sympathetic curiosity that was now common when people looked at me. Brother Liang was mending a fishing net in the main room. He looked up, his expression warm but puzzled. "I heard about your score," he said. "An incredible achievement. Congratulations. What can I do for you?" "I heard you were offered the promotion to Shanghai before Leo," I said, coming straight to the point. His face clouded. "I was. But I have a family." He gestured to his wife and 2 young children playing on the floor. "I couldn't leave them." "I won't." "What if you didn't have to?" I asked. They both stared at me. "The rules are clear," Liang said. "The promotion is for the worker plus 2 family members. I have 4. I smiled. It was a thin, sharp smile. "I might have a solution. The government is eager to support students like me. As a top-scoring student, I am allowed to bring 1 family member with me to university for support. I have no one to bring." Understanding dawned slowly on Liang's face, followed by disbelief. "You mean? Temporarily register one of your children under my household registration," I said. "When I go to university, that child will be my designated family member. You, your wife, and your other child can then go under your promotion quota. Once we are all in Shanghai, we can reverse the registration." The air left the room. Liang and his wife looked at each other, a world of hope and fear passing between them. It was a risk. It relied on trust and bureaucratic maneuvering. But the prize was everything. "Why would you do this?" Liang's wife whispered. "After what Leo did to you." "Because Leo doesn't deserve that position," I said, my voice cold. "You do. And because I need a friend in Shanghai." It was a pact sealed with a shared enemy and a shared dream. We agreed immediately. The next day we went together to see Director Jiang. He was still smoldering with anger over Leo's deception. Our proposal, to correct an injustice and promote a man of actual integrity who kept his family together, was exactly the outlet for his fury he needed. He promised to expedite everything. As Liang and I filed the official paperwork to transfer the registration of his youngest daughter to me, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Leo's life in Shanghai was built on a lie. I was now building mine on a foundation of truth and strategic alliance. His comfortable new existence was about to be dismantled, brick by bureaucratic brick, and he was still sitting in his parents' apartment, waiting for a letter from a woman he believed was too simple to write one. The train to Shanghai was a river of humanity, carrying me away from the silt of my old life. I clutched my single bag containing my few possessions and, more importantly, my letter of acceptance to Fudan University. The landscape outside the grimy window transformed from endless fields to scattered towns, then to the shocking, sprawling outskirts of the city. The air itself changed, tasting of coal smoke, salt from the Huangpu River, and possibility. I did not look back. The university was a world unto itself, a cacophony of eager young voices, bustling bicycles and grand old buildings that seemed to hum with knowledge. I found my dormitory, a simple room I would share with 3 other girls, all of them a decade younger than me, their faces bright with unlined hope. They chattered about professors and parties, casting curious glances at me, the older, quieter woman from the countryside. I simply smiled and unpacked my books, building a fortress of silence around myself. I was Anya, the peasant scholar, the provincial miracle. The story had preceded me, a minor legend I neither confirmed nor denied. I let them wonder. My age and my past set me apart, but that was an advantage. I had no time for the social intricacies of campus life. I was there with a singular, ferocious purpose: to learn, to excel, to never again be dependent on anyone's mercy. The coursework was demanding, but the discipline of my months of solitary study served me well. While my classmates struggled with the transition from home to university, I was already battle-hardened. The all-night study sessions in the library, the frantic memorization. This was not a burden. It was a privilege I had fought for with blood and tears. I was not the most naturally brilliant student in my cohort, but I was undoubtedly the most determined. I became a familiar solitary figure in the library, my nose buried in texts, my mind stretching to grasp concepts that would have been unimaginable a year before. Meanwhile, Leo's life was unraveling. The letters to the village had stopped. My parents, following my instructions, had ceased forwarding his increasingly desperate missives. He was shouting into a void. His confusion must have curdled into panic when the official notice arrived. I learned the details later from Brother Liang, who arrived in Shanghai with his family a few months after me, the bureaucratic transfer of his daughter having gone smoothly under Director Zhang's watchful eye. Liang sought me out on campus, his face grim but satisfied. "It's done," he said. We walked through the campus grounds under the shade of ancient ginkgo trees. The complaint was officially filed. Abandonment of spouse, misuse of state funds, moral decadence. With Zhang's testimony and mine, the evidence was overwhelming. Leo had been summoned before his unit's party committee. His lofty rhetoric about national interest failed him this time. The committee saw only a man who had lied, manipulated, and abandoned his peasant wife for a city girl. His moral record was stained, a black mark that rendered his technical skills irrelevant. He was dismissed from his prestigious position. With no income and his reputation in tatters, he and Mateo had no choice. They were sent back to the village in disgrace. The same village he had so desperately wanted to escape. Liang described the scene he'd heard about from others. Leo hollow-eyed and defeated, and Mateo, a sullen shadow of the boy he'd been, boarding a train going in the opposite direction, back to the life they had both scorned. I felt a flicker of something, not pity but a cold sense of closure. The wheel had turned. For a time my world was quiet. I focused on my studies, my past life receding like a bad dream. I rarely thought of them. Then a new policy was enacted. Educated youths were allowed to return to their home cities. Leo and Mateo, having been forcibly returned, now qualified to go back to Shanghai under this new rule. They scraped together the means and returned, but Shanghai is an unforgiving city to the fallen. Liang told me Leo found no organization willing to hire a man with his stained record. He was unemployable. They lived in a cramped, miserable room, surviving on meager savings and the kindness of his aging parents, who were themselves shamed by his actions. It was a bitter, impoverished version of the Shanghai dream he had coveted. It was during my second year that they found me. I was walking out of the main university gate with a classmate, Ling, a bright-eyed girl from Hangzhou. She was chattering about a boy in her sociology class when she nudged me. "Anya, you've been here for ages. Why don't you ever date? Don't you get lonely?" I was about to give my standard vague answer about being too busy with studies when a voice, ragged with emotion, cut through the campus chatter. "Anya." I turned. Two figures were hurrying toward me from across the street. It took me a long moment to recognize them. Leo looked a decade older. His fine clothes were gone, replaced by a shabby, worn-out jacket. His face was lined with worry and hardship. Beside him was Mateo. He had shot up all limbs and angles, but his face was pale and drawn. He walked with a slight, noticeable limp. Leo's eyes were wide with a desperate, hungry relief, as if he'd found an oasis after years in the desert. He rushed forward and grabbed my arm, his grip too tight. "Why?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you write back? Do you know what we've been through? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you help us?" The questions poured out of him, an accusation born of utter desperation. I shook his hand off, my face a mask of cold contempt. "Help you?" I repeated, my voice low and sharp. "Weren't you the one who called me stupid? Who said I'd embarrass you in the city? You abandoned me. You took my money and spent it on your mistress. Why on earth would I help you?" Shame and anger warred on his face. Mateo's eyes filled with tears. "Mama," he whimpered, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. "Don't you want us anymore?" My classmate Ling's jaw dropped. She looked from them to me, her eyes wide with shock. "Who are they?" she whispered. "Nobody," I said, my voice flat. I turned to leave. But Mateo cried out, his voice breaking. "Mom, please. We have nowhere to go." Ling, recovering her senses, stepped between us. "Hey, leave her alone," she said, her voice firm despite her youth. I didn't look back. I took Ling's arm and walked quickly away, towards the sanctuary of the campus, their pleading cries fading behind me. Leo's voice, rising in panic, "Anya, we're your family. You can't just," was cut off by the closing of the university's large iron gate. Ling was silent for a moment, then asked, "Anya, were they telling the truth?" I took a deep breath. There was no point in hiding it. "Yes," I said. "The man is my ex-husband. The boy is my son." She stared at me, utterly bewildered. "But, you never said, you seem so young." "I aged out of that life," I said simply, and left it at that. They came back a few times after that, lurking outside the gate. But word spread quickly among my classmates. The story of the peasant scholar who had escaped a terrible husband was too dramatic to ignore. A group of them, led by the fiercely protective Ling, would now form a wall of solidarity whenever Leo appeared, shooing him away with sharp words and disapproving glares. After that, the letters started again. They were forwarded from the village, addressed to me at the university. They were no longer filled with poetry, but with bleak accounts of their struggle, their poverty, their hunger. They were pleas for help, for money, for salvation. I didn't read them. I stacked them neatly in a box. They were not letters. They were artifacts of a life I had escaped. A life that was now finally begging at my door. The box of unopened letters became a monument to my resolve, a physical manifestation of the life I had shed. I moved it from under my bed to the top of my wardrobe, out of sight but never quite out of mind. Their desperate words, though unread, seemed to emit a faint, persistent hum, a reminder of the precipice I had climbed away from. Their pleas, however, eventually took a tangible form. Small money orders began to arrive with the letters, tucked into envelopes I now slit open with clinical detachment. 10 yuan. 20. Pitiful sums, a fraction of what I earned from the research projects I'd begun assisting with under my advisor, Professor Wang. It was guilt money, desperation money, a pathetic attempt to buy a foothold back into my life. I felt no gratitude, only a fresh wave of contempt. He was still trying to manage me, to establish a transaction where none existed. Without a flicker of hesitation, I endorsed the money orders, not with my name, but with a single word: donation. I walked to the university's administration office and anonymously contributed every last yuan to a scholarship fund for students from rural backgrounds. Let his pittance help someone else escape. I wanted no tether to him, not even a financial one. My world, in stark contrast, was expanding at a breathtaking pace. Professor Wang, a formidable woman in her 60s with eyes that missed nothing, had taken notice of my dogged work ethic. While other students chased top marks, I chased understanding. I was the first in the library, the last to leave. My questions in seminars were sharp, born of a practical curiosity the younger students lacked. "Anya," she said to me one afternoon, gesturing for me to stay behind after a lecture on material science. "Your analysis of the tensile strength composites in the last paper. It was unorthodox. You approached it like an engineer, not a theorist. Where did that come from?" I met her gaze squarely. "From a lifetime of mending tools and understanding why they break, Professor." A slow smile spread across her face. "Practical experience is a teacher theory can never replace. I have a research project. It's tedious. Lots of data collation. But it's important. Are you interested?" It wasn't a question. It was an invitation. I seized it. The project became my new obsession. It consumed my days and nights, but this was a consumption I welcomed. It was a different kind of labor. A labor of the mind, valued and rewarded. The stipend I earned was more than enough to support myself, and with it came a sense of self-sufficiency that was more intoxicating than any praise. I stopped being Anya, the peasant scholar, and became Anya, Professor Wang's protégé. The respect from my peers shifted from curiosity to genuine admiration. I had earned my place. Years flowed into one another. I graduated with top honors, and Professor Wang, without hesitation, offered me a position as her graduate research assistant. I accepted, my life seamlessly transitioning from student to academic. The university became my true home, a world of ideas and intellectual pursuit where my past was irrelevant. I heard about Leo only through occasional reluctant updates from brother Liang, who had built a successful life for his family in the city. Our paths crossed sometimes and he always looked at me with a mixture of awe and pity. He's working construction, Liang told me over tea one day, his voice low. Day labor. It's brutal work. The boy Mateo. He tries to help but he's not strong. There's a darkness in him. I listened, my face impassive. I felt nothing. They were characters in a story I had stopped reading. Then Liang's next piece of news landed with a heavier thud. There was an accident on a site. A scaffold collapsed. Leo's hand was crushed. They couldn't save it. He's lost the use of it. Manual labor. That's over for him now. Image flashed in my mind. Leo's hands, always so careful, so clean, holding a book, wearing those glasses. Those hands that had never known real work were now broken, useless. The irony was so profound it was almost literary. A small, cold part of me acknowledged the poetic justice. The larger part of me felt only a distant, weary sadness for the utter waste of it all. Mateo was now a young man, adrift in the city with a broken father, his own education stunted, his future bleak. He was my son, a piece of my flesh, and he was drowning in the consequences of a fate I had escaped. I said nothing to Liang. But that night, in the quiet of my campus apartment, I made a decision. It was not born of love or forgiveness or maternal duty. Those bridges had long since burned. It was born of a final, pragmatic need for closure. I would not have his destitution be a ghost that haunted my conscience. I would pay a final debt to the boy I had once loved, and then I would be free. The next day I withdrew a significant sum from my savings. It was a large amount to them, a manageable one to me. I asked Liang to act as an intermediary. Give this to Mateo, I said, handing him the envelope. Set it up as a monthly stipend sent to him directly. Ensure he knows it is from an anonymous benefactor. It is for him and him alone. Not for his father. Liang understood. He nodded, taking the envelope. It is more than he deserves, Anya. You have a good heart. It is not about the heart, I corrected him gently. It is about balance. This settles the account. Finally and completely. With that last thread severed, I could truly fly. My work with Professor Wang was gaining international attention. We were on the verge of a breakthrough in a specialized field of materials engineering. An invitation came, a prestigious international research symposium in Germany, followed by a year-long collaborative research fellowship. Professor Wang was to lead the team. She chose me as her second. The world was opening its doors. As I prepared for my visa, packing my bags not with desperation as I had years ago, but with confident purpose, I felt a peace I had never known. I was no longer defined by who had left me behind, but by what I was moving toward. I was leaving Shanghai, leaving China for a time. And I knew with a certainty that felt like fate, that I would not see Leo or Mateo again. They were part of the soil of my old life, and I was a bird destined for a different sky. The money I sent was the last echo of a closed chapter. The future was a blank page waiting for my hand to write upon it. Germany was a world of sharp, clean lines and a language that sounded like machinery. The symposium was a whirlwind of brilliant minds, complex ideas exchanged over weak coffee and strong beer. I was no longer Anya, the anomaly from the countryside. I was Dr. Anya, a key member of Professor Wang's team, my contributions noted, my questions respected. The fellowship that followed was a year of intense, focused collaboration. We worked in state-of-the-art labs, our findings slowly building into something significant, something that could change the properties of materials at a fundamental level. Throughout it all, the question from my colleagues, both foreign and Chinese, was the same: will you stay? The opportunities here, the funding, they couldn't understand why anyone would leave. But the answer was always simple for me. My education, my second chance, had been given to me by my country. The subsidy from Director Jiang, the system that allowed the exam to happen, the university that took a chance on an older student, it was all part of a structure I felt a duty to repay. Professor Wang and I had made a pact. Our research belonged in China. The return was triumphant. We were met at the airport by university officials and a small press corps. Homecoming of brilliant minds, the headlines would read. We brought back not just knowledge but patents, international connections, and a renewed sense of purpose. The decades that followed were not a straight, easy line upward. They were a relentless, rewarding climb. I moved from Dr. Anya to senior researcher Anya, And finally to Professor Anya, leading my own team, mentoring my own graduate students. I never married again. My life was my work, my students, my legacy of knowledge. The loneliness I had feared never materialized. My days were too full, my mind too occupied, my heart too invested in the young minds I guided. I built a life of quiet, profound satisfaction. I bought a small, sunlit apartment overlooking a park. It was filled with books, not the cheap trinkets Leo had once thought defined a city woman. My world was one of intellectual debate, of laboratory breakthroughs, of watching my students, my little swallows as I came to think of them, find their wings and soar. I heard about Leo's death through the vague, impersonal grapevine of hometown news that occasionally reached me. The illness, prolonged and difficult in a cramped apartment. I felt a pang not of grief, but of a final, quiet sigh for the tragic arc of a life so consumed by selfishness that it ended in isolation. I did not attend the funeral. There was nothing for me there. My mourning for that man and that life had been done decades ago in the silence of my room in the village. Oh, I heard he drifted. The monthly stipend I sent via Liang had continued for years, a mechanical act of severance. I heard he used some of it to learn a trade, electrician work, but that he struggled with stability. He was a ghost at the edge of my consciousness, a reminder of a path not taken. We never met again. My own death came not with a bang but with a gentle letting go. It was in my apartment, surrounded by the quiet hum of a life well lived. My students, now doctors and professors themselves, came from all across the country. They filled the room, their faces etched with a love and respect that was deeper than family. They were my true children, the offspring of my intellect and my compassion. Through the crowd I saw a figure lingering near the door. A man, his face lined and familiar, yet I couldn't place him. He wasn't one of my students. He had Leo's eyes and a weariness that spoke of a hard life. Perhaps it was Mateo. Perhaps it was just a trick of the light. It didn't matter anymore. A profound peace settled over me. I looked at the faces of my students, their eyes bright with tears they tried to hide. Don't cry, I thought, my mind clear even as my body failed. You are all little swallows who have never known true storms. You have been sheltered in the nest of knowledge. But that is your strength, not your weakness. You will soar higher than I ever could because you start from a greater height. I closed my eyes. There was no darkness, only a soft, golden light, like the sun over a field no longer mine to till. I had not just flown to Shanghai, I had flown into the future and I had helped build it. The wait was over. The journey was complete. I was free. The end.